We are recording this, so if there is anybody else on your team that needs to see this or is interested in the information, you can pass that on. And of course, at the end, there will be an opportunity for some Q&A, because there are some programs in the works that Nancy is in the lead of. And so having this type of engagement with industry is really important. So Nancy, I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce yourself and then take it away. And of course, any questions that you may have, we'll have an opportunity at the end to have some discussion. So take it away, Nancy.
Thank you, Liz. Great to be here with everybody today. As Liz said, my name is Nancy Healy. I'm the Commissioner for Employers, and my job is to represent employers at the Canada Employment Insurance Commission. So you're all familiar with EI, employment insurance. It's paid for by workers and employers. Employers pay 58% of the premiums, and I like to say I should get 58% of the say as to what goes on there, but I don't. But I'm there to make sure that the EI system is run efficiently, that it has the proper integrity measures, and again, like I said, represent employers' interests. And a lot of times, what I'm doing is saying, no, we don't need enhanced benefits. Stop, time out, that kind of thing, because both government and labor are constantly pushing for those changes. Labor has a representative on the Canada Employment Insurance Commission that's nominated by organized labor, so they're often advocating for what organized labor wants. But what I hear when I talk to employers, they don't really want to talk to me about employment insurance. Every now and again, there might be an issue or two. They want to talk to me about labor market and the labor shortages that they're experiencing. And some of the money that we have in the EI program goes towards workforce development. We do take a small bit of the money that doesn't go out in benefits, that goes into workforce development. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. So just quickly, I'm going to talk about, like I just told you, so we're already a step ahead who the Commissioner for Employers is. I'm going to talk about the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. I got some numbers on where it stands. I think it's 2025. I don't have the latest data. I'm going to talk about workforce alliances, Reimagining Immigration, which is a paper that I prepared that has over 85 employer organizations from across the country that have signed on about a better way that we could do immigration that's more predictable for everybody involved. And then I'd love to open it up and hear from you guys as to what you're saying, because my job is to consult and convey with employers to bring back their concerns to the Canada Employment Insurance Commission. And the reason why the commission has some interest is because ESDC, which is the department we work through, does something called the labor market impact assessments about the temporary foreign worker program. So that's how kind of get implicated into this whole TFW program. So first thing I just want to talk to you quickly about and bring to your attention is something called workforce alliances, which again is taking money out of the EI pot to build the labor force for the country. And as you know, one of the priorities of the Government of Canada is building more housing. And they have other ambitions as well with respect to critical minerals and electricity and, the defense sector and the like. So they've created 6 workforce alliances in the country for 6 priority areas. The first one that is listed here, I don't know if it's their first priority, is housing and construction. And the sectors that are included in this are forestry, manufacturing, and construction. And their goal is to take on the nation building projects with a focus on residential construction. So trying to meet the residential construction needs that we have. The structure of the Construction Workforce Alliance is in the works. I believe Canadian Home Builders, in collaboration with the Canadian Construction Association and other groups, have put together a proposal that's being reviewed by the department. And the idea is to help address the challenges by first identifying what the labor market needs are, then set priorities, and engage all stakeholders in the ecosystem. And as I said to Liz, I just want to make sure that you guys are aware that something called workforce alliances are being develop in the construction and housing sector. The goal is around housing. And as you guys play an integral part in this ecosystem, I want to make sure that you're at the table. Liz says you're going to be at the table. I do believe that this is all like at national, but we don't build houses in Ottawa. We build houses throughout the country. And so the tentacles, whatever the right word is, need to spread right across the country with industry and suppliers and people who are boots on the ground. So I always like to take this opportunity to let people know something called workforce alliances are coming, especially those that are a part of the ecosystem in the housing and construction sector. And hopefully you'll be hearing from your local home builders association or construction association or whomever very shortly, or perhaps through Supply Build Canada as well, as to what role you guys can play and how you're going to be part of the ecosystem. So stay tuned, because the money for this is coming out of the EI fund, and I just want to make sure that people are aware of it. All right, that was my one little, what we'll call, a public service announcement for you guys. Now we'll get into the temporary foreign worker stream. So this is some of the latest data that I asked for. So it covers April 2025 to March 2026. Think about that. Geez, I've already had my coffee for the day. So this takes a look at how the number of temporary foreign workers that have come in a high wage stream, and I also have another one coming up for the low wage stream, and each province and territory. And essentially what you're seeing are like significant decreases in the number of people coming through each stream in the country. For example, I know this is small, and I'm going to share the deck afterwards for everybody. It's even small for me here. So it goes through what are the top NOCs that have been approved in the country. Um, uh, Fish and seafood plant workers was the number one in the low wage stream. Food service supervisors and cooks were the next two. The three top sectors were manufacturing, accommodations, and other services. So it just kind of gives you a sense, as you all know, there's been a clamp down, a reduction in the number of temporary foreign workers. You're seeing in the high wage stream, like the number of truck drivers dropped by 47%, carpenters by negative 52% in the country, welders and related down 47%. In construction, the NAICS less 55% less temporary foreign workers coming in through the high wage stream. So you're seeing huge drops in the number of TFWs. And then again, I know these numbers are really small, and when you get it on your own screen, you can zoom in and see how each province is being impacted. But it's down right across the board. And this is for the dual intent residents only labor market impact assessments. And again, you're seeing decreases from primary ag to low wage stream, high wage stream, and people who are permanent residents. So, and it breaks it down by each province and territory. One of the other interesting things that I like to share is this only came when I was preparing the deck. I'm sorry, it's almost like the last thing that said to me that I put it in. But last week when I was preparing this deck, this study from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business had just come out, which I found fascinating. And what it is is a nutshell is they demonstrate how there are fewer young people in rural Canada to be able to take jobs compared to. So there's actually a breakdown in an urban place like Toronto, there's 15% more youth than in a rural area, which would only have, say, 10%. That's the average. So there's just fewer young people in rural Canada. And so I've often been arguing that we probably need to do something more directed toward rural, remote parts of Canada in our immigration strategies. And they also talk about, the jobs that and so this is the top LMIA occupations in the country, and I have the link to that so that you can look up and see what the top labor market. And so retail sales supervisors. I just wonder if anybody here have been using that one as the main one. It's one of the top 10 in the country. The other thing that the CFIB study said is that youth aren't willing to relocate to move to a rural, remote part of the country to take a job, and they're not interested in certain jobs that maybe have overnight shifts or require heavy physical effort. They're just not interested in those types of jobs. So there's a mismatch, and so we often hear, well, why are you trying to bring in immigrants or temporary foreign workers? Surely there's high youth unemployment. Well, this CFIB study showed that there are fewer youth in rural Canada, and also there are fewer, the youth just don't want to take some of these jobs that pay near minimum wage, that is outdoors, or or it has manual labor, or requires physical effort. And that TFWs are filling critical gaps. That this is again part of the CFIB study, that 78% of small businesses say the TFW program provides access to skilled and reliable workers that they can't find locally. 90% report difficulty filling positions previously held by TFWs, and 52% of small businesses say TFWs has helped them stay open and continue to employ Canadian workers. So I really think this is good data that we can use. All right, so let's jump into reimagining immigration. So I've been working on the temporary foreign worker file for a while, as I mentioned, because it falls under Employment and Social Development Canada, which is the department that I'm attached to. By the way, I've been an advocate for employers all my life. I work for the Chamber of Commerce movement. I work for the Tourism Industry Association. So federal government and working in there is like a foreign land for me. It's a bit of a territory. So I've been an advocate. I've been like Liz all my life, and Jay, I've been working for employers, and that's kind of how I talk. So I might have a government of Canada business card, but like I said, it's like a foreign service to me, a foreign territory. So I started working on the temporary foreign worker program and all the negative news about it, because there's all, it's constant. Organized labor is constantly trying to undermine the program because they want to control the labor supply in the country. The vast majority of employers in this country are good, legitimate employers. There's a few bad apples that have gotten in, and their stories seem to be exploited. A couple of years ago, you may have heard about a fellow by the name of UN Special Rapporteur, who did a report on Canada's immigration system, and said our temporary foreign worker program was akin to modern day slavery. I was actually asked by Global Affairs, the UN ambassador at the time, Bob Ray, to meet with him to try, because he never met with any employers when he came to Canada. And you can imagine, if you got an invitation from the UN Special Rapporteur on slavery, you probably would like, I don't want to take that meeting. He was probably like, "Who? Okay, who are you, and what do you want?" But we did end up meeting with him, a group that I have assembled of employer organizations at the national level who are interested in immigration policies and the temporary foreign worker program. And I think we brought some balance to his final report and mitigated some of the negative stories that he had. And he put a few lines that balance it out a little bit more. But still, the temporary foreign worker program, I believe, is not the program that we need. The jobs that we're trying to fill are full-time permanent positions. They're advertised on Job Bank, which is also something I have insight into because it's offered by the department to help the unemployed find jobs. And over 90% of jobs at Job Bank are full-time permanent jobs. The jobs that are going into the labor market impact assessments are full-time permanent jobs. There are some seasonal, but most of them are full-time permanent jobs. But they happen to be in low-skilled, lower-skilled, Tier 4 and Tier 5. But the only way to bring people in Canada and through Tier 4 and Tier 5 is like a two-step process. Bring them in through the temporary foreign worker program, then hope you can nominate them through a provincial nominee program. There are some federal programs, our pilot programs, like the Rural Community Immigration Pilot Project. And if you're one of the lucky 13 or 14 communities in this country to get that, you might be able to bring in lower skilled people. So, one third, over 1/3 of our economy is low skill jobs. About 35% require no high, about 20% require no high school, and about 15% are high school, less than high school. So that's where I get that 35% number. And those numbers really haven't changed too much. We have more births. We have more deaths than births in this country. We have a shrinking population, people moving from rural areas into urban areas. And, I like to say it takes the people of all skill levels to run our economy. And so I keep the why are we using a temporary program, the temporary foreign worker program, for the permanent challenge that we have in our labor market? As I mentioned, I think we need to normalize migration for Tier 4 and Tier 5 occupations. We've had this patchwork system, and certain geographic areas win the lottery and they're able to bring people in, although they'll complain about the program because they'll only be able to bring in about 250 people, and they tend to use them as orderlies in hospitals or people working in healthcare or the like, and retail occupations might not, often don't get picked up. And like I said, there are jobs that people just don't want to take. They're dirty or they're demanding, and they require people maybe to work into the evenings or on weekends as well. Canada has, by the way, the best educated labor force in all the OECD. So we've done a great job educating our kids. They all have completed high school, and many of them are going on into some level of post-secondary. So they're just and I we can go back and look at the temporary foreign worker data for the last 20 years, and I can show you, in industrial meat butchering, it's only been foreigners who've been doing those jobs for a long time. We've been looking for cooks and retail supervisors and using that as one of the top knock codes consistently recruiting from outside of Canada to fill those positions. In fact, do you know that in Quebec, you don't have to go through a labor market impact assessment for 600 knock codes because they've proven that they're for the last number of years, there's good evidence that no Canadian wants to take these jobs. So, the Prime Minister has noted that, as he curtailed immigration, that, the TFW program does have a place, and we need to consider where it fits in. Minister Haydu, who's the minister responsible for the TFW program, also has talked to me, and as recently as middle of June, was very sympathetic. I had a national business liaison meeting where national employer groups met with Minister Haydu. I thought they're going to talk about labor shortages and the workforce alliances and other things. The number one topic and the only topic that was discussed was the temporary foreign worker program and the frustrations that from the automotive automotive dealers association looking for mechanics, to I can't think of everybody, the hotel sector. There's so many. All they talked about was the temporary foreign worker program and how people are losing their status and being kicked out of the country, and how this is just not working. The minister appeared to be empathetic and sympathetic and seeing the one to get somewhere, but the key message I took from her was that, how did she put it? Because Canadians are negative on immigration now. Public policy can only move at the pace at which Canadians are willing to accept, was kind of her line that she used. To me, I don't think they're willing to go out on a limb with respect to immigration right now. There was an explosion in immigration, especially from international students in 2020, 2021, 2022 time period. And I think they're getting better control over that. Unfortunately, the people who come through the managed system of the temporary foreign worker program are getting caught up in this blanket suppression of immigration coming into Canada. I've worked on something called a Canadian International Workforce Program, which replaces the temporary foreign worker program, which it would get rid of this two-tiered system. It would give points for low-skilled immigrants to Canada who have a job offer. So therefore, it's demand-driven. It's tied to them having a job, and oftentimes, government is concerned about someone coming into Canada and being a drain on our system, not having a job and all. So this would, help negate that, and that they would get points if they're willing to come to Canada to work in a rural, remote place if they have a job that are complementing Canadian workers. So this stream, we're envisioning two streams for this. One similar to the seasonal agricultural worker program, but this could be for seasonal work, be it in seafood processing or the fishery sector or other seasonal sectors. It could be argued in tourism as well, or maybe some in retail. So people would be able to come for up to 9 months in a year and come back for over 5 years. The LMIA would be what's the word, legitimate or legal for 5 years instead of the 2 years that we're seeing now. and then have a stream for these low skill permanent year-round jobs. So these are not temporary or seasonal in nature. They are jobs that are consistently vacant. Those 600 knock codes that our friends in Quebec already don't have to have an LMIA for. Um, and they'd be able to come to Canada based on points like we do for high skill individuals. The points would be awarded if they are willing, they're taking a job in a rural remote place. This is tied to having a job. They'd get more points if they speak one of the official languages. So like I said, it envisions it kind of normalizes immigration for tiers 4 and tier 5. And I have about 85 signatories on this paper now. We've sent it to Minister Diab, and I've met with Minister Diab as the Minister of Immigration. We've sent it to Minister Haydu and met with her as well about it. And as well, I talked to officials about it. This paper came out in August, September of last year. And I have of this 85 signatories, we meet on a regular basis about once a month, and we talk about efforts that we've made to talk to both provincial government officials, because one of the things the federal government now has done is kind of delegated some responsibility on immigration to the provinces. And so one of the changes they made to the TFW program back in March, they said, well, the provinces and territories have to opt in. So, we have groups like the Saskatchewan hospitality sector. We have, the mayors in Northern Ontario as part of our organization. And we talk to them, again, 85 signatories, and they tell us about what they're hearing from meetings they've had with MLAs, with provincial government officials, with provincial cabinet ministers. So again, this seems to be, originally you would think immigration, you just need to advocate at a federal level, but now you got to advocate at the provincial level as well. So, we're always looking for new signatories to this paper and encouraging those signatories to meet with their local MP, because all politics is local. And if we have enough MPs saying, we need to do something, we need to fix our immigration system because our businesses are suffering, especially our small businesses that don't have the HR capacity. And so that's one of the things about when we meet on a regular basis. I also have something, Liz, I can go through quickly, which are my immigration mythbusters. I'll run through those. So too many TFWs in Canada. So I should update this, because just on that slide that I showed you, which I only got in the last month, we're seeing the number of people who come through the TFW program down about 25%. But even when it was at its peak, let's look at 2024. When it's at its peak. So there were 20,783,000 people employed in Canada. 191,000 were part of the temporary foreign worker program. That's people who went through, employers went through the process. Oh. So that's less than 1% of the Canadian labor force were temporary foreign workers. Now, there were other people here, people who are refugees and the international students who had rights to work. But those people that came through the TFW program, where that employer proved that no Canadian wanted to take that job, there was only 191,000. That was at our peak. That number now is down to about 120,000 in Canada. And our labor force is still around 20 million, maybe a little bit higher. So I don't think there's too many TFWs in Canada. Immigrants are taking Canadian jobs and employers just need to pay more. Well, I can tell you, since I've been in this job in 2021, we've seen wage inflation go up between 4 and 5% every year. And we're seeing it, I've taken a sector like the accommodation and food service sector, where people might claim that it's rather a low one, and even agriculture, to show what the wages are and how much they've increased over the last 4 years, and they've gone up between 4 and 5%. I'll also argue to you that a lot of people there's what they call the tip differential. People work and they get tips as well. And ag is also regulated. And especially bringing people into the TFW program, you have to pay people the prevailing wages. Those of you who've gone through the labor market impact assessment, you have to pay people the prevailing wage, and this is what the prevailing wage is in all those categories. And I think it goes beyond pay. These are jobs that Canadians just don't want to take. TFWs are contributing to the housing shortage. One of the things I love to talk about is the impact that short-term rentals, the Airbnbs, the Verbos have had. In Montreal alone, it's taken 25% of the stock out of the housing and rental market. All right. So I really don't think that TFWs are causing our housing shortage. I think that's a scapegoat that people are using, and TFWs can help build the houses that we need. And this actually is a link to this short-term rentals in Canada, uneven growth, uneven impacts. Montreal is probably one of the communities that's had the biggest impact. I use that one because it's 25% of the rental market was reduced because of your short-term rentals that are there. TFWs are treated as slaves. I have zero tolerance, as does the government of Canada, for anybody who mistreats their workers. We've enhanced the protections, and you may see some headlines from time to time. Government has enhanced its enforcement, and we're seeing a couple of phenomenons. A temporary foreign worker, all they need to say is that they're being abused, and they get an open work permit. And so we're seeing an increase in that. And they investigate. There's no resources to do the investigations. So I don't believe that we're seeing an increase in how people are being treated. They are doing quite a number of measures, because I do think there are professional illegitimate recruiters out from outside of Canada that are working in our space. And so job bankers are doing things like, you can't post a job if you're in India, right? They can tell where your IP address. So they've been cutting down on these, and just reading some of the reports over the last couple of weeks of how that has suppressed the number of illegitimate actors in the space. So we're doing our part, to make sure the illegitimate actors are removed from the system. And the employers who are been fined tend to have not submitted their paperwork on time. Those are the sorts of things that are going on. But we have a number of things: a confidential tip line, open work permit for vulnerable employers, supports for migrant workers. I actually heard like an ad on my social media one day, pulling up a video on YouTube, and it was geared towards, I think it was in Spanish or something, and it was geared towards temporary foreign workers who are here, that if you're being abused, here's the tip line that you can call. So we've enhanced measures. And TFWs are taking Canadian jobs amidst rising unemployment. Well, I think, and this myth busting is, let's precede the survey and information that came out from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. But let's look at, the cap is 10%. It might be able to go up to 15% in some areas. That means if the cap of TFWs is 10%, it means 90% of the people are Canadians working in that place. And I find that they're complementing Canadians, that business is able to operate extended hours. They don't necessarily, they're a retail establishment that closes at 7 because they don't have enough workers. Well, if they have the TFWs complementing the Canadians that are there, they can stay open until 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever. That means all those Canadians that are working there get those hours as well. So, I just think it's a myth that they're taking jobs from Canadians. Why would the labor force go up to 20, from 19 million to 20 million? Our economy was growing. We didn't have enough people in the tier 4 and tier 5 to be able to keep up with it, and that's why we were bringing more in through that category. So, my final slide is that I think we need a balanced immigration that is tied to our labor market needs, that's tied to demand, that's tied to what employers want, that recognizes the challenges in rural, remote parts of Canada, and that has greater predictability and certainty for all those who are involved. The newcomers who want to come to Canada, who are right now, and even those who have come to Canada and may be being deported, they need greater certainty. The employers need greater certainty. They don't want people for 2 years and this complete, and hoping they're going to be able to nominate them in a provincial nominee program or some other program. They need predictability. They need certainty, and the people of Canada need certainty that in our immigration system. So that is what reimagining immigration is all about. So thank you very much. And I'll stop sharing my slides and open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Nancy. that was a lot of info. I know you're sending the slides out, but I was taking some notes madly just so I can keep some of those things top of mind. One of my first questions is with the proposal that you made with the two-tier and having it more driven by demand, the conversations that are being had provincially and also with the MPs, how is that shift being perceived in terms of moving forward with it?
Good question. I think they like the controls that are there. I've been talking about, bringing employers more into the conversation almost in everything that we do because, it's the employers who control the demand side of the labor market equation, the supply demand, and so they know more they have a better understanding of what the work requirements are. I think, talking with Minister Diab, um, the sense I got was that, yeah, they want a system that has greater certainty. We didn't get necessarily into the details. Government was looking at a program similar to the seasonal agricultural worker program, which, we're celebrating 60 years to Jamaica. The Jamaica government was just up here. I met with Minister Haydu talking about, this system where we have an agreement with Jamaica and 12 other Caribbean countries, Mexico. I don't know, they're all Caribbean because Mexico and Guatemala are part of them too. So I don't know if they're all Caribbean. But we have, these bilateral agreements where the government of Jamaica is involved. I think we should expand that. Now, the ag people want their program to be, I said, let's build a fence around that, and we can build a similar program with bilateral agreements with India, with the Philippines, Nigeria. And I say those countries because those are our top destination countries anyway for recruitment, especially for tier 4 and tier 5 occupations. So I think my sense is that, and I actually shared this too, but with the International Organization for Migrant Workers, to see, how critical they would be. They want controls in the system like that. So, Liz, the federal government are holding their cards pretty close to the chest. I think they're waiting for a particular number, because, one of the things Immigration Canada does now is they boast about how immigration has declined in Canada, because that's where Canadians are feeling, according, to the public opinion polls. And so, but I think when they resurrect immigration and start bringing it back again, I think they want to do it in a more controlled way. And I'm suggesting to them this is a more controlled way to do it. But I'm not getting a lot of feedback from them, to be honest with you.
Just curious. I after your percentage of Montreal, I'm not surprised why resort communities are banning, don't allow for Airbnbs and Verbos. I didn't realize it was such a big percentage in some places. But does anybody have any questions or comments they want to add or any thoughts on the slides that you saw? Because I know some of you have had some challenges, so this is a good time to talk about some of those. Okay, Jason, you have your hand up. Go for it.
I don't know if you can answer this, Nancy. So we've nominated a few people in Saskatchewan, and as our company grows across, I guess, Western Canada, we're running into a job. I guess the job description matches the requirement, but
Yeah.
our title does not, and we're running into issues because of that not being able to, especially in Saskatchewan, through the Saskatchewan Nominee Immigration Program, if our title does not state what they're looking for, they're not allowing it. Is there a way to get around that, or a way to add the job titles into, like, our job titles in our industry to what they're looking for? Like, carpenter is a perfect example. Like, I run a truss manufacturer. I also run a home building company. So the home building company, I have carpenters that work for me, but the people building my stairs and building wall panels and doing pre-hung doors and building floor and truss systems, they're not called carpenters. They could be, but that would mean us reclassifying all their names and how they're rated. Is there a way to work around that? I know we've had a couple thrown out, and I have one guy kind of in limbo with me not being able to sponsor him because of his job description. I don't know if you know anything about that, or
Yeah, I mean, this frustrates me too because we got to, I'm sure that people are kind of jacks of all trades too, right? I mean, I have often said that job titles really don't reflect what people do, and that's not how a small business operates, right? But governments seem to be like to have these titles and standardization of what people are called, and very particular about that. But this is, Jason, what I take is, receive from employers the frustrations that they have and how the system isn't working for them, and that's what I try to work to make the changes for that. So I'd love, maybe we could talk offline a little bit more about that. And this is an example that I could bring to them of a real life example of how government's getting caught up in their titles and processes really do not reflect the reality of what's on the ground.
Yeah, I think we're having issues across multiple provinces. Like we call, again, everyone has their own name for what their
Yeah.
manufacturing side is doing. We call them, component technicians or truss technicians or
Yeah.
panel technicians or whatever you want to call them. But in theory, they are a carpenter. So but my group is refusing to change their title, right? So because they think with the carpenter title, they require more pay, or they have to be endorsed to be a red seal
Right.
or an apprentice, right? Which that path doesn't always apply to everyone in the carpentry field. So just that's probably what everyone's struggling with
Yeah.
in the manufacturing side of components in Canada, I would think for sure.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jason, because we recorded a podcast earlier today and I was told that the job title shouldn't matter. It's the actual duties that are being looked at. And while we've been told that's the case, we also have people here who we're trying to keep working for us. We have to make sure that marketing is in their job title. They're very adamant about, if it doesn't say marketing, my application is not going to move forward. So there's definitely some inconsistencies there too. And I don't know what the process is to try and create some consistency there.
We're looking at changing all our job titles to carpenter and then have level 1, level 2, level 3 apprentice red seal. But that's a lot of work for, we have possibly 1,000 employees that now fall under that. So, but yeah, I don't
It's
know
not
what
an
the
easy
solution is.
solution for you guys, and it puts the work
No.
back on small business.
Yeah.
HR, I always say, just throw it back on HR.
Oh yeah, sure. They love you for that. Kelsey, do you have a question?
Well, I was just going to say we had a similar thing as well with an NAIC code, because we have retail and also construction and plumbing. So we've got multiple different avenues. And when we applied under the Saskatchewan immigration program, they rejected it because the code was different. And then I had to go back to them and state, no, we also have other means of revenue. And then that, of course, takes time. And in our case, our guy, it can no longer apply for permanent residency because it's timed out. So now we had to apply for him to get an extension to stay here. So yeah, the codes and stuff are great.
Yeah. And when you advertise that job on Job Bank, so that's where you start, right, on Job Bank, and I've often said the job that you got to put in a Job Bank, sometimes it doesn't the job title doesn't reflect really what the duties are. And so I don't know, I guess we're all saying the same thing here. And yet they need some sort of standardization that they're looking for. Again, that just doesn't necessarily work at how business works, nor how jobs are changing as well. The
So,
duties of the job are
Nancy,
changing.
when it comes to the NOC and the NAICS codes, is
Yeah.
government looking to, is there the option to also revisit what those codes are? Because I don't know how old they are. I don't know how often they're reviewed and revised, but maybe that's where there might be some opportunity as well to say, okay, the workforce is now evolving. How do we better help our employers with their process. Like the fact that now that person has lost their ability to apply for permanent residency really sucks for them, because that is a human being who's probably here with their family. And it's not even just about their job, it's like everything else that goes along with it. And it almost feels like there isn't that human side to the process. I could be wrong, but
there's not. No, they're all very. I've met with these economists or whatever they are that work in. So it does fall under the my purview, the National Occupation Classification System, and I've met with them. We talked about. Well, I recently met with them with the marine sector, because they only have engineers, and marine engineer is a different type of engineer than every other type of engineer. Yet they say there's a marine engineering shortage, but NOC say there's not an engineering shortage. And they say, well, there's a marine engineering shortage, but we don't have a marine engineer. So we met to talk about, we might have a bunch of ships not be able to sail real soon because there are no marine engineers in this country. So you guys are going to have to get it. So we did have a meeting with them to talk about that one. So, some things that just seem so obvious, right? I mean, honestly, everybody here knows a marine engineer is a totally different type of engineer than one that's, a civil engineer or electrical engineer, or, it's completely different. So, and they say to me, the guys who do the knock, oh, it's not our fault. They're not supposed to, use them verbatim. It's a guide and all that kind of stuff. But still, I said, they do use it verbatim, and they do restrict immigration from this country because of, what you guys write in your knock codes and your occupational projections and the like. So, I mean, we certainly can meet. I mean, if they gave us an example of firefighters. So the wildland firefighters met with them and said, listen, we need a different code. And the urban firefighters agreed. Say, listen, there's a totally different skill set of wildland firefighting to urban firefighting. And so they've introduced a new knock code. So they will introduce a new knock code if it can be demonstrated. So, Jason, I'm wondering, because we talk about modular manufacturing or manufacturing houses in a manufacturing setting, right?
Would be components, right? Not necessarily
Components, right?
So to go to a job site of new home construction, the market's really shifting, right? Because of the trades, there's not enough trades to do all the building on site. So wall panelization, stair building, like all that is becoming more relevant in Canada, and there's a worker shortage. So
Right.
but like everyone's looking for people, and there's no people to hire. So once you find people that are going to do it, and then you try to make the adjustment to sponsor them or to nominate them, and you can't. And like Kelsey said, they're losing one. We have the same situation happening here. I have probably 4 months to make a call on this guy, or he's going to have to move, or he's going to run out of time to get nominated, because you have to work for a certain amount of time with that company to be nominated, right? So it's an uphill battle, right? So, and they're good workers. I don't want to lose them. So
I showed you that Workforce Alliance for the construction and housing sector, and one of the elements of that, I don't use the word components, is it was manufacturing. And what the goal was of that was the government of Canada recognizes that modular home building is going to be critical to meet the needs that we have. And so when they had manufacturing, yes, that manufacturing could have included kitchen cabinets that have always been done in a factory or a workshop or whatever, but this was to get at stairs and paneling and that kind of thing. So we might be there might be a window here under this new Workforce Alliance, and recognizing, well, gotta call it new, not modular has been new for that long. Truss has been built in a separate place for a long time, but this new approach, it's new for the knock codes people. So we probably can set something up and try to make a presentation to them about what the work really looks like.
That would be great. Stephanie.
To just jump ahead of you there, Stephanie, go ahead. Oh, sorry. I'm in a very similar situation as Jason. We have a truss manufacturing plant, and we have about 4 or 5 individuals right now that are just on open work permits, and we have no stream to allow them to stay. We've trained them. They're here for 2 to 3 years as long as their work permits are valid. But at the end of that, there's nothing we can do. So the SIMP program doesn't have a stream that allows us to bring in low skilled workers. And so, and that's really where right now we just did an expansion on our manufacturing facility, and we're looking for 25 to 40 employees like over the next little while. And we're hiring students where we have to hire twice as many. We're trying all avenues. There's just a really big shortage with that low skilled labor that we're finding. So I do appreciate this conversation, and I do appreciate the effort and the work at finding a stream for those, the knock codes and the tiers 4s and 5s kind of thing is where we fall under the truss manufacturing.
And are you in a rural, remote part of the?
We're located in Warman, Saskatchewan, just outside of
Okay.
Saskatoon. We're about 20
Yeah.
minutes out of Saskatoon.
Yeah, and I say that because I think that there's empathy or sympathy for rural remote Canada. Minister Haydu is a minister for ESDC, where the Temporary Foreign Worker Program falls. In Northern Ontario, there are 4 communities that have these rural community immigration pilot projects where it's recognized that it's difficulty to recruit and retain. Thunder Bay has one, Timmins has one. I can't name all the. North Bay, I think, has one. I can't remember what the other community is, but so there seems to me, I suspect I suspect they're going to make some changes to immigration policy for 2027. And I think they're going to do something for rural, remote parts of Canada because they already recognize that. I mean, the Rural Community Immigration Pilot Project, people like it, who have them, but it's only 200 about 200 people in each community. Still not enough, but the idea behind it is the right thing. So if they could make that kind of in effect in every rural or remote community in Canada using their census areas for defining rural remote. But the other challenge is that's where we got to work on the provincial governments too, because they're saying, well, provincial governments should have a bigger say in their immigration policy, and the provinces don't want them. So you're seeing, some changes they made to the TFW program where they're going to increase the cap from 10 to 15%. BC, Alberta, Ontario opted out, didn't opt into the program. I can't remember what the status was of Saskatchewan. I think they did opt in, but I'd have to check on that one. But so it's a dual front. We got to work at the both federal and provincial level now on immigration to get them to accept whatever changes are going to be made.
Oh, good. More levels of government.
I know.
Sid, you were going to add to the conversation. Oh, you're on.
It's also it's challenging sometimes too because we've lost people where their work permit expires, and then we'll have a temp agency show up and they'll say, hey, we have a perfect match for your business. So we're a roll forming steel business. And it's like, oh, really? Like, who is it? And then they send us the resumes and we're like, this person worked for us and their work permit expired. So how are they working for a temp agency? Like, how is that possible? Because we're thinking we lost an employee that we invested a couple of years into at least before they lost their status. And I don't understand how that works either. Like, how are we in the position where the temp agencies somehow can pick these people up? I would like to keep them. I don't want to have to hire them. Well, and we won't rehire them through the temp agency. But it just seems like the rules aren't consistent. And maybe this is a unique thing for our business, but we have 5 manufacturing sites across the country. So in pretty well, like each region, we have at least one site. Yeah, it's really challenging when you're dealing with stuff like that. And I don't think we're going to change it, but that's been very frustrating for us in this journey because this is new to me too. We've not used temporary foreign workers, or we've not had a lot of people on work permits across the other businesses that we operate. But when it comes to the steel business, this has been a common thing just because of the skill level required in the facilities. And that's been a bit of an eye opener. So, and a lot of it too has been like you talk about the different layers of government as well. Like, it's different in Ontario than it is in Alberta with respect to how quickly some of the rules have changed. At least that's
Yeah.
been our experience. Because it felt like overnight in our Toronto facility, we had 50% of our staff suddenly had permits expiring, and we really can't give them any guidance. We just have to tell them, like, go talk to your lawyer and let us know when or if you can get an extension or how we can help once you know what system you will fall under moving forward.
Yeah.
So more transparency there, I guess, would be the only comment that I have if I'm contributing.
Well, that's why, that's why they're not, the jobs you have are not temporary jobs. They're full-time permanent jobs, and you're able to offer somebody a job and an income. And, one of the things I understand the government of Canada is concerned about is somebody, especially low skill. I mean, there's evidence to prove that the lower skilled you are, the more likely you are going to need, society to help you out. You're going to go on EI, you may need a social assistance. But if you have a job, you're not likely that's not likely to happen. And the same thing with lower skill. And we know the immigrants that we have are some of the hardest working, and some of them will work under the table because they just need to get an income. What people are doing, I think, Sid, are their LMIA expires with their employer. They're desperate. They want to stay in the country. They somehow get hooked up with illegitimate employers who have bought LMIAs or fraudulently got them, and then they kind of tempt them out to other people. So that's part of the problem that we're trying to clean up, and I think there has been some clean up with that. Like we've seen where if you hire a recruiting agency to help you recruit, and so you have one job at ABC company, let's say company's called ABC, but they'll say there's 10 openings, and they'll get 10 LMIAs, and then you won't even know about it, and you'll get your one person, and then they'll have 9 other people that they've brought into the country, and they'll try to sell them around, which is wrong.
It's well, and that's where again, like when you have someone working for you with a permit already, like as an employer, I would like to have a stronger voice in vouching to keep them, because we've already, and our goal is to get them. And so the temporary piece to your point, it is like we are expecting permanent employment. We want these people to like grow within our organization. That is our goal, is to move them from the low skill to a higher skill role over time. And maintain that talent pipeline. But that's very hard to do when it just feels like we can't be a part of the process at all. Like we're essentially told, like, no, like it's in that individual's lawyer's hands. And knowing what we're compensating them, I'm assuming they're not getting they're not getting Harvey from Suits representing them, to try and figure this out, right? So I just, like, being realistic, then I'm sitting there going, well, we lost someone who's super talented that we really like, that we love being part of our team. And, I'd love to try and help them more. I don't know how to do that. So thank you for your insight on, because I didn't know the back channeling of, these temp agencies that approach you consistently. And it's like, how are you getting all these people? And we're struggling.
Yeah, there's an underground that's going on, and I think it's growing now as people become more desperate as their work permits have expired or are expiring or whatnot. So, but this notion that tier 4 and tier 5 jobs are not important, or I constantly try to fight this notion, and share some stories about, I see in our local hospital an awful lot of newcomers who are working, bringing the food or cleaning the floors, but you know what, that neonatal unit will not operate unless that room is sterilized. And so, they're all part of a critical team. There's a story told about NASA back in the 60s, and this group was taking a tour, and there was a young fella, mopping the floor, and this guy went over and he said, what do you do here? You're a janitor? He said, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. And so, it takes a village to operate an economy. It takes a ladder. We don't just build buildings and houses with architects. and engineers and Red Seal carpenters. It takes a whole team, and there's an awful lot of laborers that go into it, from preparing the ground to whatever. So we got to stop being so snobbish in our immigration approach in this country. And we, so we bring in those architects, engineers, and doctors, and we don't recognize them for 10 years, and they're driving taxis or Ubers or whatever, or driving for Skip.
That too. Samuel.
Yeah, thanks. I'll be quick here. I know we have just a few minutes left. Just a comment on the whole urban versus rural areas, and then even to some of the other individuals on this call's points on the whole title thing. Just a frustrating experience we had recently. So we have 3 locations here at Star: Edmonton, Calgary, and Winnipeg. And in Calgary, we had a individual who's currently working as a lead hand, and his immigration specialist, or whatever you want to call it, kind of poised that he needs more of a supervisor title. So chances are we had a supervisor opening here in Edmonton, and he did apply. We interviewed, everything went well, and we actually did proceed to offer him that position. However, with the whole location factor coming into play, so physically we're in Nisku, but we just classify ourselves as Edmonton. So we thought we could classify under the rural aspect. Unfortunately, though, IRCC or his immigration specialist said he wouldn't be able to move to Nisku. He was all ready to do it, but he wouldn't be able to move to Nisku because his chances would still be the same, because they would classify it as Edmonton.
Right.
So we're physically not a part of the city of Edmonton, and same thing with our Calgary location. They're in Rocky View County, which is north of Calgary. So it would be nice when it comes to the locations to actually either have a mold to kind of fall into, or just really know what to do in that kind of situation.
Yeah, and listen, I say I think there's more sympathy for rural and remote parts of this country, because we can show some data, but like that CFIB study I was referencing that said, the number of youth between 15 and 24 on average is about 10% of the working population in rural Canada and 15% in urban, but still they're jobs that young people, who often take the entry-level jobs, don't want to take, because we've educated them so well. So although I think there'll be more sympathy for rural over urban, I still think there are jobs that Canadians just don't want to take. And as I said, Quebec has already gotten over that. So we can often, when we're arguing in other jurisdictions, Quebec already says there are 600 knock codes that we know no Canadian wants to take, and you don't need to do a labor market impact assessment.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you presenting to us today, Nancy, and I really appreciate everyone's feedback. I think this opened our eyes a little bit more to some of the challenges. Jay and I are going to be participating in some of these groups that Nancy had mentioned earlier, because we do want to make sure that the industry is represented. Obviously, it sounds like we need to have some more discussion about it, or we might need to get some more clarity, but it's definitely something that we'll be working on. And of course, if you got anything further you want to add, please let us know. This is what we're here for. We're here to support the industry, and we want to see it be healthy. And we know that the whole workforce piece has been a challenge. We have a lot of people retiring in this industry. We've already seen it happen. Our labor study told us it's 20% over a 5-year period, and we're halfway through that, and we're seeing those numbers come to fruition. And so there's a lot to backfill, and anything that we can help to support you to keep your businesses running efficiently, we're here to do. So really appreciate everyone's time, and happy to continue this conversation. And Nancy, keep us posted on anything that you think we need to be doing as well from an association perspective. And if there's ever opportunity for further engagement, let us know.
Thanks everybody for coming and taking the time. This really grounds me. Like I said, my job is to consult with employers and convey the ridiculousness of some things, like what's in the knock code or whatever. And so this really helps